Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Sexy Business Podcast. I'm Lewd Neko, and joining me is Spooky Dangerous.
Hello.
And today we are going to be doing another game focused episode. And today we are going to be talking a bit about the Femboy Fuda RPG Tales of Androgyny.
This game's a really big one in the niche. Arguably, you could say Fuda World and Tales of Androgyny are like the big two games, especially when it comes to fan base. So we've both gone and played it recently on the free version that is available on itch.io. Played a little bit. I've played it several times over the years as research for our games. But we've both come back to it recently because they do update pretty regularly to come and have a look at what some of the new stuff looks like. But to start off with a bit of an overview of what the game is like, you have your own main character, Hero, and you are kind of wandering around this world that they've created. Kind of like the classic RPG where you can see your person walking around on the map as you go from different nodes to towns, to treasures, and sometimes encounters that will have different creatures come and interact with you, keeping it PG for no reason.
Yeah, totally. Just have a pleasant conversation. That's
Absolutely. Maybe some hand holding if you're lucky. Oof. And then as you kind of wander around, a lot of the stuff that you're doing is about adjusting your stats. Like if you drink way too much cum, you might get a perk that makes you better at doing that. Your butthole diameter is constantly measured and displayed to give you an idea of some of the things that the main character could be suffering. And you're depending on your goal. Normally, as a player, I'm not interacting with a story beat. My goal is to just unlock the new galleries. But the way that your character can interact with the world and change and suffer can play out to a specific narrative and stuff as well. So you're basically following the main character's descent into completely unraveling. And there's a lot of different ways that can happen, and a lot of different creatures and characters for you to encounter along the way. And I think we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the character design as well, because that is kind of the key to any game like this. Like, I don't really want to fuck the backgrounds, I want to fuck the characters. And yeah, do you want to kick off and start introducing some of them?
Yeah, I think like first things first, something to note about like the art style in general is it includes both like traditional CGs as well as like animated sprites and animated scenes.
Mm.
And there are quite a lot of them. So if you're a fan of lots and lots and lots and lots of art, this is definitely a good game to check out. But we're going to start by talking about the main character, whose like given name, I guess, is Hero. And I think what's most interesting about Hero is that there's a couple of things that you can change about him that actually do change in the CGs. So there's a little bit of that customization and that like feeling of immersion with things like the hair color and the eye color. So for example, in like my save, I gave him yellow eyes and pink hair for no reason at all. And I
Cute.
thought it was really cute that you actually got to see the hair color change in the CGs. It's a nice small detail.
Mm. You can also give him a really fat ass for no reason. Well, not no reason. It's put to use, but no other reason. I think Hero is interesting because it presents as very femme. I think it's like intentional, whereas
Mm-hmm.
like very specifically femboy. Whereas most other characters that you encounter in the game are Fuda,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Yeah, there are a couple other femboys. There's like a handful of sort of side characters. You're like, one of me.
yeah, yeah. Well, that kind of brings us into the next character, Kai Lira, which is supposed to be a companion that travels with you, and is also kind of a femboy, but again reads as incredibly femme. Like there's actually no really masculine character design in this game at all, and everything is much more femme leaning, but just having massive meat for most characters, I guess. And Kyler, I think,
Yeah.
is pretty cutesy, and is an interesting match to the main character because I think it's representing a specific path that the character could take. It's kind of assumed that for the most part, you as the main player is going to be playing through a very submissive route of the game, but you can actually be a top. You can actually top Kylera. You can top a bunch of the characters in the game, depending on how good your stats and resistances and stuff are. Your personal moral ability to stay atop instead of letting your inner bottom come out. But I think, yeah, Kylera kind of exists to represent what hero is like moving towards, like in becoming more femme or whatever. And then most of the other characters that we've put in our short little list to run through here are monster girls. And I think that's a part that's not super obvious going in, that all of the characters you can interact with are kind of monster girls. I think that should be more of a thing that they're excited to tell you about, but you do kind of see it in some of the promotional art. But the first one we've got is the Were Slut, which is a werewolf, big knot, big heat energy kind of character. And you encounter her like really early on. It could potentially be your first encounter if you go to the right direction. And each time you encounter a character, you're unlocking different CGs based on if it's just like a repeated thing and there's like another different one ready, or if you meet a specific stat threshold or certain way to do an encounter. So there is a lot of exploration in repeated encounters in the game.
Yeah, I gotta say something I really like about the Monster Girl design is on one hand, I will say, like we've previously talked about monsters, this is kind of fitting. And these ones trend to be more of the like mostly human girls with some animal features or monster features. It really depends. There's a couple of characters like the harpies or like the mermaid that definitely lean more animalistic. But with the example of like the Were Slut, she's got tail and an ears and some
And fur,
canines and
yeah.
then the cock, but it's not going to be like super. She doesn't have fur like all over her body. She doesn't
Yeah.
have paws or anything like that. But what I will say about her design is it's very unique. I think there's a lot of sort of like generic like werewolf hot girl designs you could think of. I certainly wouldn't expect a blonde werewolf, which I think is
For
really
sure.
cute. Like she gives off massive like golden retriever energy.
Yeah.
And then there's stuff like I like that she has the little like paw print, like womb tattoo almost is another cute detail. And also her body type is just very cute. I like that she's got a bit of pudge on her stomach. I'm all for body type diversity in lewd games.
I think that's another thing that this game does very well. Almost none of the characters have the same silhouette. Like you've got your femboy characters that are clearly not an hourglass. You've got some of your super thick characters like the mermaid that do have a bit of a tummy for smooching. And then you've got other stuff like the centaur, which is obviously again completely different, but is still going to have a different torso to other similar characters. And some of the more monster stuff, which we'll get into in a second, which again are more and different again. So I feel like it does have a nice range of interesting diversities as well. We also see a lot of different ethnic design in characters. Like we're seeing not just pale characters, but we are seeing like tan and dark skin characters as well. Some of which I believe you can choose. There's a debt collector rabbit that comes and gets you that I believe they have an option for every different one, and I can't remember if you choose or not. And then the main character,
you can also
you can change stuff as well.
Yeah, you can change heroes, race. Only like two of them. I think if you choose the elf or the orc, those ones have actual differences, but I think the rest of them are mostly aesthetic.
But yeah, that brings us to next on the list, which was the harpy that you briefly mentioned before. I think the harpy is interesting because it's obviously got wings instead of hands, and then it's got the like clawed feet. But then like everything from like knees to elbows is still very human girl. Well, except for
Although,
gigantic meat, I guess.
and the feather pubes.
That's true as well. Yeah, some of the stuff that they do is like I can't tell if this was while they were drawing they thought it was fucking hilarious and they're like, let's do it, or if it's like actually a very good idea. Because in theory, if you're a bird, you don't have human hair, but she still has human hair on her head. So
Though it is kind of feathery hair. It's like a couple of strands, or actually all of it. If you look really, really close, you can see like the little feather lines on it,
okay,
which
interesting.
is very creative.
But yeah, it's very committing to the idea that it's a bird instead of something like Monster Musume, where it's like feels like much less. Even though you could argue that they're very similar designs. But yeah, the harpy is an interesting one. There isn't a lot of harpy content, but again, it's another one that you can find kind of early on, and it starts your meeting characters that lean more Monster Girl as you kind of move along, because you meet Kailura kind of early, and a lot of the other characters near the kind of starting area are a bit more human. But next after that is the Centaur and the Unicorn by extension, which is similar but different color scheme as I understand it.
Yeah, you get this the unicorn if you like go to the horse fields and you're still an anal virgin.
Yeah.
Then you get to see the unicorn because only virgins can see them.
Yeah, exactly. And then they beat up your inside so that you're no longer a virgin. The dream. And so yeah, the Centaurs is another interesting one where obviously it's a horsecock deal. In the same way that like the Westlight is a dogcock deal, we're getting to see a lot of different dick representation in this game, which I think is also kind of interesting. We also get to see some ovipositor type stuff as well, which I think is also interesting. We've kind of mentioned that before with a Monster Girl episode, but having different ways that it's used is like an immersive layer to the game, I guess. Like, I'm supposed to believe that this is a monster. In the same way that, like, every alien movie, they're like, here is the alien man, here is the alien man's dick. You're like, okay, sure. But yeah, Centaur is pretty much what you would imagine with a horse. This is obviously much harder to do as a podcast and on YouTube, where we can't just fucking show you the pictures and point at them.
Imagine a big boobied woman attached to the body of a horse.
With a massive horse cock. Just gigantic. And then while you're imagining that, we're going to move on to the next character, Urka. So this is another companion type character, but is not a femboy like Kailura. Urka is like a hyper top. Probably the most masculine character in the game. And is got big grumpy bitch energies. We love her. And has massive meat. Everyone has massive meat. I should probably just stop. It's redundant to point it out at this point. And Hero has like the least, and is in search of more meat. I guess it's the quest for more meat.
Meat quest.
Yeah. I think Urka is a great character. As far as an orc goes, it's not too human, right? Like, it's not just green woman. It has a lot of orc features. And in a way where she's still pretty, right? Like, it's not
the chompies.
She's got big teeths, and I really like the outfit as well, because they get to play with that a little bit as well. We can kind of see around the loincloth and stuff, which is pretty cool. I think Urka is a great character design, because it's again like playing on a trope rather than like the harpy, for example, which is pretty much exactly what you would expect if given. Whereas the orc girl, you would probably imagine a bigger, something more like the Etten, where it's like the gigantic muscle mommy type thing. Where Urka is a bit more approachable and human, but is still like very angry in the facade, very kind of aggressively designed, in a way for you to read top. Yeah, intentionally, right? Yeah. Absolutely.
Not too scary, but she definitely commands a lot of presence the first time you see her.
I just want to do what she tells me to do. That's it. That's all that's needed.
Easy.
Next up is some of our more monsters with Arachne. So this is a big spider mommy, similar to the Centaur, where it's like woman's body on spider instead of horse, but has the big ovipositor and does have an egg laying scene, and like a pseudo bondage type thing with getting you wrapped in webs and stuff, which I think like works really well because like if you're specifically into those things and you encounter the spider and she delivers upon those things that you would expect is very good, rather than going to the spider and then it's just some regular ass shit. Like in again, I come back to Monster Musume with the spider character is like I'm just regular girl, except additionally I do shibari, and I'm like that's not that exciting actually. That's really kind of normal compared to some of the other stuff we've seen in the same show. But with
I
Arachne,
will
you do
give
get to see
credit
a lot more.
to, yeah, this version of Arachne. There's so many monster spider girls named Arachne in like
Mm.
anime, because there's also the one from Soul Eater, though she's not actually a spider girl, but she has a spider theme. But this one they really do commit to the bit. I will say I'm actually someone who has like a pretty significant arachnophobia.
Mm.
And her design admittedly squicks me out a little bit. I think it's mostly because there's like an actual spider like on her like back kind of.
There's
And
other
I can't.
smaller spiders that come and interact with you while you do her scenes.
Yeah, I just like that freaks me out a little bit.
Yeah.
But like I really like that because I appreciate going for that and committing to that design and being like, we're actually gonna make this look like a spider and not just a hot woman with like some spindly appendages and that's
Yeah, Spinneret, who is just woman with 8 arms.
it.
Yeah, and I do appreciate because in the theory in the game, if you are encountering someone that you're not interested in seeing a scene, you can escape or you can leave.
Yeah, or you
Um,
can just hit that skip button pretty easy.
yeah, so you don't have to suffer through it. But if you are really into it, there is depth for you to explore and look at the different scenes and stuff like that. And then next one on our list is the Minotauress. So this is more the big muscle mommy type. Because there is a significant size difference. Not as much as the Eden. I think the Eden is the biggest character in height. But then like Minotaurus is kind of in between. But she has like more defined muscle. So I think the intent
Yeah,
is
she's like thick in the muscly way.
yeah. Um, and I think has really dynamic posing when it comes to the scenes that you do together, which I think makes her more interesting than the others. One of the other things that I guess we haven't mentioned so far is that certain characters have way more content than others. Like Kylira shows up a bunch. Urka has like fucking 30 things on her own, which is clearly her favorite. And then Dark Knight, the last one on our list, I think has the most out of all of them, just based on the navigating through the main menu and finding the scenes listed. Because it's just like tons of variations of different stuff and things like that. But seeing which characters they've spent a lot of time on, I'm trying to figure out is this like the fans were like, yo, I need so much more of this, or the developers were like, this is actually my favorite thing, or like with the stuff that we're making, we'll do something small. Like in Sleeve Shock, we had a moment where you got to see feet. We had like a feet scene for the first time in any of our 3 games. And we were like, I don't know, are people gonna hate this? And then a bunch of people were like, no, actually, yes, please continue to do this.
More.
That's my one thing. I'm like, okay, this character, their route is now going to feature this interest more prominently, right? Because obviously, I can't wait for characters more than others in what they're doing. Like Tales of Androgyny can, because you have encounter rates, you have different locations that are specific to them. Like you can go and find some characters because they're fixed in the world that they're always going to be there. And then knowing how often a person is going to encounter them, if you know it is a lot, or you have like a story arc that they have to play through, then you need to add more content to it or whatever, right? So I am interested in their model and how they've put it all together, why they've made the choices, why certain characters are, how they're designed, like why is the centaur on the unicorn the way that it is, because a lot of the CGs are identical with the color change. So is it like we really liked the idea of the unicorn only showing up if you were a virgin, and so we wanted to play on that, but we didn't want to do whole new CGs or something like that? So I'm curious about that. I accidentally muted myself. I did want to delve into our thoughts and feelings from playing the game. This is a bit less like a review, but a bit more about just what our experience kind of was playing it. But do you want to open us up? Do you want to start with some of your
Yes.
gripes and glimmers?
Yes, I've played this like two kind of separate like long-term sessions. So I did stream it a couple of times. I ended up not committing to this one because it's a really text heavy. Which as like someone who streams, I have to be careful how many text heavy games I'm playing at once because
Mm.
my throat will start hurting, which for the not fun reason, just because I've been reading really long sex scenes for like 2 hours. But and then my first time playing it, I'll say what I remember was as soon as I got into the character creator, being very overwhelmed, because after you like design your character, you're kind of presented with like all these moves and sex positions and perks you can have and magic you can have, and you have a certain amount of skill points. And it's not like totally clear what all of these moves do yet, or like what ones that can actually work with your class. So that was like a little much just for like to be thrown into. So I think a good comparison point for me for this game is Corruptions of Champions. It reminds me a lot of Corruption of Champions because they have similar sort of vibes of like it's a lot of monster girls who want to fuck you. Corruptions of Champions has like a much wider like gender diversity, whereas this one's very like fetish centric on Femboy Fuda. But they also have similar like kind of RPG, almost D&D style mechanics, because this one has like a class system and all these sorts of ways you can create your character. But where Corruptions of Champions starts off pretty simple and can get complicated as you go if you want it to, this one kind of starts pretty complicated. And I think you learn a lot as you fuck around in it. The rest of it is like going through itch.io comments and Reddit threads and being like, are other people confused? What does this do? So I think that was like my initial impression was it's not bad by any means. It's a really interesting combat system, but it is a lot to digest, especially if you're horny.
Yeah. This game does have that problem of the pacing can be really weird. Like, if you just encounter a really good scene and you get really close and then the scene ends, you could be wandering around doing nothing for too long to be able to find the next scene and then potentially get back to that same spot.
Edging, just the RPG version.
Well, I mean, you could just literally play this game while you are locked in chastity or something like that, so that
I
you're
mean, that's a funny
just,
gameplay mechanic.
play along with the main character. One of
Yeah.
the gadgeteer, which you can encounter almost immediately, can lock you in permanent chastity at the beginning of the game, so that you become anal only. Um, and then additionally, she'll peg you if you continue to ask questions. And so then, if you do that, you could literally be playing alongside the character as yourself IRL. You might need to get some horsecock dildos and dragon dildos to be able to keep up, but surely it's
Yeah, I will
possible.
say something I do think is interesting is like the skill checks. So a lot of scenes will do like various skill checks, depending on your agility or your perception or your strength and things like that. So it's like, oh, depending on your perception, either you're going to perceive that there was a monster girl lurking in the shadows, or you're not, and she's going to get the jump on you.
Mm,
Or, you have like sexual sort of skill checks where it's like, oh, you can do this scene if you're a slut, but if you're not a slut yet, you're going to be too like shy and chaste to immediately fuck the monster girl or something like that.
yeah.
So I did like those sorts of options. I also like that you can choose to fail. So if you're like, oh, technically I'm strong enough, but I want to see what happens if the harpy dominates me, then you can just choose the fail button, which I think is a great option.
I think it's great too. I think it's really funny, even like in an immersive way, where it's like you recognize that you could potentially not have to suffer the consequences, but you're choosing to be a bottom in this instance.
I gotta fill up that CG gallery, man. That's more
True. Yeah.
important.
Yeah. That is a game design issue that I have with stuff like this, where it feels like my goals in the game is to unlock the CG gallery for me to beat my shit to later, than actually play through and enjoy exploring the game. Because of the inverse problem as well, right? Like if I just have the CG gallery all unlocked from the beginning, then I just don't play the game and I just look at the CG gallery because
Hmm.
why would I spend time looking for the things when it's already there? So it's kind
And
of
the
hard
story.
to, yeah, right. So it's kind of hard to find that uh, proper reward mechanism for the gameplay, so that you can actually go through and be playing it and exploring and discovering new stuff. And sometimes that comes from not everything going into the CG gallery, or the CG gallery is a whole scene captured for you to go back and replay.
Hmm.
Um, and so, depending on how you want to build a game to reinforce the player, so it doesn't have like a constant charge dump problem, whereas you play through one scene, come, and then close the game, or play through one scene, get edged, stop, nothing happens for 10 minutes, a
Hmm.
scene, get edged, repeat forever, tab out and scroll down Twitter and find something better to hyok your shit to. Um, it's hard.
Yeah, that's like something that I think, because like so when I played this time, and by this time I mean like 2 hours ago, when I was like, I'm gonna quickly like speed through and see what I can do. I tried to make like a very slutty character because when I'm playing, I play two ways. So like I play with like my like I'm actually role playing like I want to try to get like good endings and do sensible things, and then I play like sluttily where I'm like I want to fuck all these characters and get as many scenes as possible. And this was the time where I was like, okay, I want to fuck all these characters and get as many scenes as possible. So I made this really slutty character. I chose the slut class. Like I got all the slut moves, and then like I got into it, and it was really unclear and tedious to actually do the sex combat,
Mm,
because like you're kind of limited in like what you can do, and basically it's like more like tiring out the other character and then you can defeat them. Whereas like if I compared that with something like Corruptions of Champions, where you can defeat characters using arousal, there isn't quite the same equivalent here, and that's something I liked about Corruptions of Champions, where like you can have characters that have more of like like typical attack based values, and then you can have characters that can do things like teasing that do cause certain forms of damage and stuff like that. I also liked with like Corruptions of Champions more that you're not punished as hard for like sex scenes. It's usually very clear if you're going to get a bad end from like failing to this character. Like if it's a boss character, or like certain significant characters, you can kind of intuitively be like, oh, if I fuck up this battle, it's probably going to put me on a bad end. Whereas with Tales of Androgyny, it can sort of happen a little bit more unexpectedly, which can be fun for some people if you're like into that like random element. But with that, I think my other complaint is I wish there was more autosaves in this game. There's only
mm,
one autosave that's good. It's always good to have a autosave versus none, but I wish it had more of the style of autosave where it's like every 5 to 10 minutes it creates a new one and they stack. Because there was a couple of times where, like, for example, my character got put in chastity because as a punishment, and I had to pay like 100 gold to get out, and I was kind of like, I'm not in the mood for this right now. um so I was like, I'll just reload, but I didn't have the right autosave. And so like that was kind of annoying for me, which I know is on me. I should have just been saving more. But I'm a modern gamer. I expect the game to do it for me.
yeah, it also has an early game, late game problem where, because the map is quite large, and some encounters are split based on where they are on the map. That, yeah, if you're playing like I was, where it's just searching for CG gallery stuff, and you're gaming over constantly, or because the way I played through every combat was just kneel, surrender instantly. Let them have their way with me, do my best, rub my sore butthole and move on, and then try and find the next thing that I was looking for or whatever. If you game over a lot, and some of them, like the Etten, for example, will almost always game over you, then you just like, okay, I'm starting again, I'm starting a new save or whatever. And it means that the late game content is so much harder to get to,
Mm.
so that a lot of that stuff you can kind of miss. So if you do get there and you kind of don't figure it out, then you're kind of stuck and you're like save scumming through almost all of the game to make sure that you actually can find and get to all of the content. And which even then sometimes is very hard to still do. Um, as I understand it, my CG Gary is currently complete, but like for my first 2 or 3 playthroughs, I only got to maybe 30 or 40%.
Yeah, something so another game I've been playing recently is Third Crisis, and that one also has like a huge fucking gallery. But something I ended up really enjoying about it is that they actually included gallery hints. So if you go to like one of your empty slots, you have the option to click on it for a hint, and it'll tell you like a piece of advice on like how to get it. Like, oh,
That's pretty cool.
you should talk to this character when you have this much, perversion or like whatever. And I think especially for games that have like gameplay triggering like scenes, so like basically like anything that's not a visual novel where you can kind of just
Mm,
like brute force it until you get the CG. Like take for example the unicorn. So you can only get to the unicorn if you get to that field and you're still an anal virgin. And there's a pretty good chance you accidentally get fucked by like the harpy before you see her, because it's pretty easy to lose in combat. Or maybe you were just playing for fun and you're like, oh, I want to get that fucking harpy cock. So
bro,
it's really easy to
same.
like miss that scene and then just like never know even like how you would get it. I don't know if maybe there's like a character somewhere that implies of like how you would get that. But if it's not, in the dialogue somewhere or something you can find in the game, I think there should be like external hints in games like these that sort of let you figure out like, oh, how could I have gotten this other monster girl, or how could I have gotten her to do this other kind of scene?
This one shows you uh, the entire incomplete gallery, so you can see what characters you've not encountered and how many scenes of a character you've not seen yet. But it doesn't tell you how to get them or what you needed to do for it to happen. Especially when a lot of them are just alternates. Like being in Chastity creates
Mm,
a lot of alternates for different characters.
mm.
And so if you just never do that, then you will just be constantly wondering why you're missing 3 or 4 from a lot of characters. So yeah, adding hints or something like that would be really good. Adding a um, something like a faster playthrough mode, so there's less wandering around or no repeated
Mm.
encounters. If you've already like, I can't encounter something that I've completed the CG gallery for, something like that,
Yeah.
to streamline the gameplay so it's just constantly impact. I think would
Mm-hmm.
go really well, but I think goes against the design model of the game because it's similar to cufflinks and cages where you spend time wandering around and then a scene happens, and then you spend time wandering around and then a scene happens, and it's kind of intentionally that on-off kind of thing because it's supposed to be trying to build tension before you encounter a scene, and the scene is supposed to build you up, build you up, build you up, and then have an exciting climax. But
Yeah, I will say we were playing the free version, which only has the sort of open world mode,
mm,
whereas the Patreon does have a story version. If people have played that, feel free to sound off in the comments if it is like a more like linear, sort of well-paced experience. Maybe we'll revisit this with the Patreon version in the
yeah,
future, because that was something I was really curious about. Because I generally prefer, in my porn games, linear experiences or experiences that have a sort of like easy to follow building story. So something
curated
like Corruptions
pacing,
of
yeah,
Champions, where it's like, okay, I have a boss I need to get to, and I know how to get to it, and I have like a quest log, and I have an overarching story and things like that. Whereas this one, it's just like you're thrown into the world, and you can kind of encounter smaller storylines and various characters, but it's loosely connected, at least like I said, in the free version. So possibly in the story mode, there might be more of a overarching narrative that we don't know about.
mm. But that is our time once again here on the Sexy Business Podcast, where we get to talk about a whole bunch of other stuff that is happening in our NSFW space, like Tales of Androgyny, a game which does command a lot of respect these days because of how successful it has been for so long. It's been in development for many years, running on the similar model that we do, where you're releasing new content sort of regularly to keep the Patreon going and keep fans excited about new things happening. So it's much more like a living game or a live service game than okay, here's the entire story, go and play through it. All right, you're done. Well, we're working on the next thing now. Come and see us in a year. Which I think is interesting, and it's definitely hard to commit to a big project in that way. Because in theory, if somebody buys a game on Steam or itch.io, they're not making any further purchases on that product. They're just going to continue to get updates forever, and all you're doing is cultivating a fan base. So it is interesting to come and talk about what we think it does well, what excites us about these kinds of games, to give you an idea if you're a game developer that you're working on stuff, or if Mayalis, the devs, are watching this. Please, we love you. Don't hate us. We really enjoy your games. And we do want to be able to showcase cool stuff for people to get an idea of what's going on. Because I feel like maybe no one or not many people in the YouTube space for definite coming and talking about these things and risking getting banned like we do, so that we can come and talk about this cool stuff and normalize some of these NSFW experiences, because we think sex is cool and fun, and we definitely have it, and everyone should be able to find ways to explore themselves and enjoy them, and be able to check out cool, interesting niches and fantasies like this game doth display. But once again, that is us for the week. Hopefully we will see you next week on the Sexy Business Podcast, because you totally clicked the subscribe button. I'm certain of it. I watched you do it before, and because you clicked the subscribe button, you get to see Happy Neko doing the happy dance. And if you also clicked the like button and you left a comment about if you had played this game on the story mode, I genuinely would like to know what the differences is like. Are we just missing out on something crucial? Do we need to come back and play this game again? Please let us know so that we can use your guidance to help us get there. But once again, we will see you next week on the Sexy Business Podcast.
Bye bye.